I love this.
Okay,
So
cool,
like I can
cool.
talk as much as you want
Okay, I
about this.
appreciate it.
So we also create these rules. So I'll zoom out. We have a personality. I define personality as how we act in different situations. So if you take the aggregate of every situation and how someone acted, you could derive their personality. We then, because I couldn't tell you every single situation, every single behavior, we then create labels that chunk up that behavior. And so we give a term, he's a control freak, he's whatever, because it's easier to say that. And then the person who hears that has a series of behaviors associated with that one word, and then thinks, okay, I think I know what that person's talking about. And fundamentally, this is how language works. We bundle and unbundle terms. And so I'll give a third grade level one for the audience, which is if you think about, if I were to look at a 5-year-old and say, hey, get better at basketball, there's nothing they could do with that. You can't get better at basketball. I could then break it into, okay, you have to pass, you have to shoot, you have to dribble, get better at, passing, shooting, and dribbling. Even there, still kind of hard. Underneath of passing, I might say, okay, I want you to take your right foot and I want you to step towards the person and I want you to extend your elbows and I want you to finish with your thumbs down and leave your hands there and have the ball go to the other person. If the person catches it in the motion that they're traveling, then you did a good pass. That is something that a 5-year-old can do. And then if I break down shooting and I break down dribbling in that way, then they're going to be able to have something that they can do. And then in aggregate, later, they'll be described as a good dribbler, a good shooter, a good passer, and then eventually a good basketball player. And so to your original question of how do I give this, I'm having trouble giving these things up. It's more so having trouble defining what exactly you think good is. What does good look like? How does this person know they did a good job? And a lot of times it's not one or two things, it's like 37 things. And so it's being very exhaustive in the details of what we think good is, so that we don't say do good job and then expect them to guess and get it right when we couldn't even define it for ourselves for them.
What you're just
No. So burnout is just when the cycle of reward that you're accustomed to either becomes too latent, so too far in advance, not intense enough, or you habituate to it, or it stops happening. So there's all 4 of those scenarios are basically like what used to feel good when you do something doesn't feel as good now that you've done it 100 times. And this is basically the hedonic cycle. And so it also works in equal opposite, which is like if you punish a child or you punish anyone in the same way, eventually you habituate, you get used to it. And so in order for punishment to be effective, you have to change variety and intensity of punishment in order for it to keep working, right? And so again, the same thing happens with reward. And so when we get burned out, we used to do these things and we used to get this satisfaction out of it. And now I do these same things and I don't get that same satisfaction. And so we feel burnt out. So basically it's the experience of an extinction curve on a behavior. Now, where it gets tougher is where you have other contingencies that make it difficult for you to leave. And so you have competing priorities. And so it's like, let's say you have a family who relies on you. And you had this job, and when you started it, you had to do these activities, and it rewarded you. But over time, people just started to expect you to do it. They stopped saying good job, or just the nature of the work. It no longer was challenging for you because you got so good at it that it wasn't, again, the challenge itself is rewarding when you overcome it. So there's lots of reward cycles that happen on a daily basis. But anyways, as you continue to work, now let's say the job is 0 satisfaction, but it still pays you. And so there still is a reinforcer that occurs. And reinforcement just means anything that makes a behavior happen more. That's it. Anything that does that is a reinforcer. And so getting paid is a great reinforcer for doing something, but it's still all the other reinforcers in the job might have gone away. And so your family might have expectations, which also rule following for you as a global thing, because I have an identity as a good father, a good provider, that I have a rule that if I were to not provide for my family, it would be against this rule I've made for myself. And this identity, this label that I've scrapped for myself. And me just thinking about the fact that I'm a good provider gives me reward. It reinforces me. And so what happens is when we quote like shift behavior over time, it's we create a label. Like what you want if you want to change someone's behavior is you give them a label that they can live up to, and then you align the actions. You do this, you are this type of person. And then eventually they begin to do other things because they like the label, because the label itself is reinforcing. That might have been a little too heady. This sounds silly, right? But I was 22 years old, and to put this in perspective, like I wouldn't take my shirt off during that period when I was at like a pool party because I didn't want the other guys to feel bad. Again, not in an arrogant way at all. I was like, I just don't want, I was like, they
You're
will
coming from
feel
humility.
worse. Yeah, I was like, they will feel worse. And who am I serving here? Am I serving my ego by taking my shirt off? Like, what am I, you know what I mean? And so I was 100% all in, 100% submitted to Jesus, to God during that season. And there's a number of reasons that I fell away from that. But I define belief as acting as if. And that seems like it's like a pretend, but I don't mean it like that. It's more that if an alien comes on Earth, doesn't know anything, and I were to describe a true Christian's behavior, so they could say, this is a Christian, then they would behave as if Jesus was the Son of God and died for their sins. And again, I'm not saying there is no salvation through acts. I understand that. But if you really, in the Bible, it's truly changing your heart, right? Which I see from a literal sense as changing your global reinforcer, is that when I was in this period, all acts I took was pleasing my Father. And so all I could think about was pleasing him. I cared nothing for man. I cared for man to please my Father, not because I cared about what the other man thought. And so I would say that a large percentage of behaviors that I learned in that period of time is how I act now. And I think the reason that of all world faiths that exist, the one that has always had a stronger pull for me, that Christianity has been the one that has always had a stronger pull for me, is because it's the only, like, this is, and I do not mean, this is in no way am I trying to insult anyone's faith, to be very clear. Like, the vast majority of religions, when summarized, could be summarized into, if you do good things, you will go to the good place. And if you do bad things, you go to the bad place. They are works-based faiths. The difficulty with works-based faiths is that when you're 51% good or 49% bad, if I held one more door open for an old lady, I go to eternal bliss, and one less door open, then I go to eternal damnation, which also seems like an incredibly man-made construct of you live a finite life and have infinite punishment for it, or infinite good place. So the only faith that doesn't have that, there's two that I would consider. There's Christianity and there's Buddhism. Buddhism's, I would say, less faith. It's considered a faith, but it's different. Whatever. But because Christianity acknowledges that it's a silly game and you'll never win. You'll never be perfect, ever. And so it's only through acknowledgement that you will never succeed at being good enough to merit eternal paradise, that only through admitting that you'll never be good enough can you gain salvation. That made a lot of sense to me. I was like, yeah, this is the only way it could actually, to me, it was the only way that made sense, which is, I think, one of the postulates of C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity that most deeply resonated with me. I was like, this makes a lot of sense. And so I know I went down a route finding the amorphous. Like, this is what I spend my time doing. And I believe that all things we can translate into, like, what does this mean? Like, if I say, you look at your kid and you're like, I need you to love her. He doesn't know what that means. Or she doesn't know what that means the first time they hear it. You have to then describe what love is, and you describe it in actions. And then eventually you say the word love, and it's just like dribbling in basketball. It means all of these behaviors. Now, I measure love by how much I'm willing to give up to maintain something. If a friend moves away from close by, let's say I'm friends with my neighbor, he moves far away. If I stay in touch with that friend, I'm willing to basically incur more cost in order to maintain that relationship. I love that or like that friend more. I see it as the same continuum. Whereas if they move away and I'm not willing to be inconvenienced anymore, then I don't like them that much. If they're here, it costs me less, and so I'm willing to do it. And so I think, again, all of this sits on a continuum of how much I'm willing to give in order to maintain something. And if you're willing to give up your life in order to maintain your relationship with Christ, then I would say you're willing to give everything. And that's amazing. And so I think love, if we're using love as belief, but I don't necessarily think they're equivalents. I think acting as if would be belief. Then there is a spectrum, and this is where I struggled.
I just meant the measurement.
Yeah, and but those are both continuums, the love continuum, the belief continuum. And People sit on different ones for different things. Like I'll give you the most basic example. There's probably a country on earth that if I said, Caracas, right? It's the capital of Brazil, right? Or it's the capital of Venezuela. Maybe the Venezuela one, you're like, okay, I think that is the capital of Venezuela. And I'd be like, if you get it wrong, she dies. No. How much do you believe? That like, I think it's that. It's like, yeah, how much? Are you willing to bet everything you have on it?
Yeah.